Hello and welcome to another one of our videos where today I'm going to be discussing endurance training and the fact that it's possibly making you weaker. Alright, so let's get into what we're going to talk about. So firstly, let's define endurance. So really, this is Wikipedia definition. It's the ability to endure an unpleasant or difficult process or situation without giving way. And if it's in a training context, it's sort of relating to a race or sporting event that takes place over a long distance or otherwise demands great physical stamina. They're also classified as low intensity training. So most people would associate endurance with marathon and stuff like that, and that's fair enough. But it's would also fall into the category of most strength training, most resistance training, boot camps, aerobic classes are also a form of endurance training. Maybe not to the degree of marathons, although some people do make it like that, but it is definitely more of an endurance component as opposed to what strength training really should be. Right, so firstly let's define low intensity and high intensity. I find a lot of people get this confused. Alright, so low intensity is basically a high volume of training, or if we're talking gym, it's higher volume of reps or sets, and usually a minimal time of rest, and it's linked with the endurance, and slow twitch muscle fibers will be really sort of hit big on this type of training. The benefits to it, obviously you're going to have greater stamina, ability to last long periods, some aerobic capacity will be definitely improved, and you will have some strength gains, there's no doubt about that. Examples are, like cycling, running, all that sort of stuff, aerobics classes, but also, like I said, a lot of the strength training, circuit style stuff like that you see these days, a lot of CrossFit stuff. It's very heavily endurance focused, because if it was high intensity, it wouldn't last. If it lasts longer than really 90 seconds, it's low intensity. All right, so anything that's even really to be exact, it's probably more than, if it lasts more than 20 seconds, it's low intensity. But we'll go into the high intensity stuff, and as you'll see here, high intensity is low volume of reps and sets, something long periods of time to rest, linked with pure strength, speed, power, and definitely the fast twitch fibers. Benefits are you're able to move explosively fast, improved anaerobic cardiovascular output, massive strength gains, examples being sprinting, gymnastics, weightlifting. You can see here, like the duration of this sort of intensity is probably a second. Same with a lot of the gymnastic stuff, it's like explosive, and the sprinting might, in this case, it might be 10 or 20 seconds tops for the 100 to 200 meter stuff. Once it starts going longer, you'll see the physiques change. So the physique of a 100 meter runner versus a 400 meter are completely different. 400 meter times are roughly about 42, 43 seconds, I think, and Usain Bolt, as we know, runs 9. So it's only a 30-second difference, but the explosive fast twitch fibers and physiques of these athletes are completely different. All right, so now that we've got an idea of high intensity and low intensity, how does this relate to endurance training? Well, firstly, there's nothing wrong with endurance training if it's used wisely, but there's only a big problem when it's the only thing being used, which is what we see for 95% of the population, are really just doing stacks of endurance training with zero high intensity training. Even when they think it's high intensity, it's just a whole heap of exercises stacked on top of each other that now makes it low intensity. Example being CrossFit, they actually take some Olympic lifting exercises, which are high intensity exercises, and make them do them for reps or for time, and back them up after other things. So you're actually completely training the exercise incorrectly. You're really just not getting what you should have got out of it. Alright, so if you incorporate high intensity training in all phases of your training is fine, but actually it's best to have a bit of a blend of both. So if I had to pick one, I would definitely just pick the fast twitch stuff. I'd definitely pick high intensity over low intensity any day. All the clients I've worked with for over 13 years who were good at high intensity training, like gymnastics and weightlifting and stuff like that, sprinting, were always the strongest, the fittest, the fastest, the healthiest people. They were rarely injured. When they were injured, they recovered quite quickly. Their discipline to training was so much more, and their discipline to techniques and stuff was so much better than the endurance people who often had chronic injuries, multiple health problems. Yeah, I'm not saying it's every one of them, but generally speaking, that's what I see. All right. So the biggest difference between these two athletes, the weightlifter and the marathon runner, is this guy's, he's really pushed himself beyond his limits. As has this guy. The difference is technique and skill is a huge requirement here. Technique and skill here really can be compromised. Most people can compete in an Ironman and have absolutely never had any running training technique in their life. They wouldn't even know what it was. They don't care because all they need to do is last the time, so they can finish the event and get away with it. This guy cannot compete in weightlifting if his technique is not 100% perfect. All right, so for the technique can be compromised, yeah, it's definitely this guy. All right, so just understand that when we move forward. So if technique and skill is sacrificed in endurance training, and most of the time it is, for the feel the burn and the no pain no gain, often the sort of stuff that you hear around, and people are admired for their ability to push through the pain barrier, just like that other guy who completed a marathon and his technique is probably awful. Technique's the first thing to be thrown out. So things like breathing correctly, stability or mobility, or just understanding how to move are rarely even given a look at, because it's not considered a priority, because the intensity is so low that there's a risk of injury is minimised in the short term, but in the long term it's being actually increased, which is, I spend most of my time dealing with people with chronic injury, and I can tell you right now that it's endurance stuff is a big contributor to many of the people I see these days, which is ironic considering you think it would be preventing it. The training that also, what we see a lot is the fast twitched fibers being trained to be slow. So this is a bit common in Pilates and a lot of the boot camps where we see people using exercises to train, say for example the glutes, doing like lots of endless repetitions, 50 of these sort of abs and butt class things, and holding them and pulsing them and all this sort of stuff, saying feel the burn, feel the burn. You're actually training that glute to become quite slow. You're giving it, it's actually what it actually still needs to be. It's okay to do that, like I said before, but if you don't ever follow it up with its ability to lift heavy things or move fast, it actually loses that, and now it'll actually compensate around it, and you'll completely disrupt the timing and the sequences. So when you go to work and you go to need to lift something heavy or fast, you don't have the ability to do it. You cheat through it and go somewhere else, and then bang, you blow your back out. All right, so there must be a progression. If you're doing all that stuff, and it's fine, Pilates is great, and I might use some stability exercises quite a lot because I have to with people who've injured, but I am always trying to progress to standing up, and I'm always trying to progress to the timing that's going to be required when I'm out of the gym. All right, and I'm rarely am I ever going to be needing to do I'm never going to be needing to hold my abdominals like that ever, but it can be okay to use if it has a progression, and it is not strength training. This is not strength training. This is just statically holding things and creating the feel the burn stuff. It's not how we move. All right, so if we compare what we've just seen now to the explosive sports or movements as such, the technique and skill is non-negotiable. You cannot ever not master your technique. High intensity comes with high risk, so you know that when you're going into it, so you spend a lot of time developing the skills. So you must learn how to breathe correctly, how to become stable. If you have a mobility deficit, you have to attend to it and correct it. The movement skills have to be 100% perfect, which is movement skills really incorporates all three of these together. There is never a compromise, ever, and you're really earning the right to train at this level. Weightlifters, for example, could spend 12 months before they even get a bar, where they're just learning through all this stuff. Could even be longer. Same gymnastics, and they have real dedication to their training to be able to learn how to move like that. All right, so when people are starting out, they have a choice. There's a fork in the road. First, they could go Firstly, they could take this road where they learn good techniques, skills, master the movements in preparation to do things at high intensities like gymnastics and sprinting. Great long-term results from training like that. However, it will take considerable time and it is difficult to learn, and commitment, discipline, and dedication is required. Or you could choose where you can sacrifice technique. The intensity is never going to be really all that high, so you can do heaps of volume of exercise and the intention is just to do more. Short-term results may be okay, take little time to get started. Actually, you can get started straight away. Very easy to learn because remember, technique is not a huge priority here. There's some technique, but it doesn't matter if you're not perfect. You can get away if you're sort of nearly there. Commitment, discipline, not essential. You can sort of stop and start as much as you want. It won't cost you. All right. Most people will pick option 2. Even though the results from option 1 are so much better. And why? Because it's easier. Because it's just too much hard work to learn how to do things correctly. So if I'm using running, sprinting is so much more difficult to learn than marathon running. And I've done marathon running. It's boring as buggery. Like, I'm not saying as marathon runners are not good, but I'm just, like, you can pace yourself. The anxiety levels aren't as great as they are in this. My training for sprinting was so much more intense, and I had to spend so much more time, and I was never a good sprinter. I was a much better distance runner. I just didn't quite have the technique and the powers and the speed to be able to do it. But if I had my time over again, I would have spent more time here than there. In the weights room, it's so much more difficult to master a deadlift with 100 kilos on the bar than to do this. If I get a couple of these wrong, it doesn't really matter. If I get one of these wrong, it'll cost me big time. The benefits of getting this right are going to give me so much more than any of the stuff I could spend. I could do 10 million of those and it'll still never be as good as learning one of them. All right, so most people will pick that and that, even though these two are going to deliver the better results. So why am I against endurance? Well, I'm not against it at all. I actually do it myself. However, like I said, I've competed in half marathons and I still do 200-kilometre cycle races and stuff like that. The only problem I have with this is that the potential to create injury. So if you're doing stuff like this, like I do, I also train with heavy deadlifts and power training, and really have phases of my training where I incorporate high intensity all of the time. So I counter the damage that I'm doing to myself from this by doing the stuff that's going to preserve my speed and fast twitch stuff that I really need, that prevents all the injuries that I see. So in my job, most of the people I see are rehabilitation, and the same things are common all of the time. Poor movement skill timing, poor mobility, poor stability, poor strength with the phasic fast twitch muscle fibers. All right, so these guys are the ones that are prone to being long and weak with muscle imbalance, where all the tonic guys are the ones that overwork and hyperactive, like hip flexors and pec minor, things like that. All right, the ones that create a lot of the back problems, shoulder problems, all that sort of stuff. They're being predominantly improved with endurance training, and the ones that I really need to strengthen, the serratuses, anteriors, the glutes, they're all the phasic guys that are really used in the fast twitch and powerful movements. All right, the other thing I also see is older adults, and in our recent video we spoke a fair bit about this with older adults losing their ability to move quickly, which then increases their chance of falls. So they just, because they don't move fast anymore and they actually lose that quicker than their muscle, it exposes them to dangers. And then we see exercise programs that improve their ability to move even slower. So it just sort of defeats the purpose. There definitely is a high risk in training them to move quicker, but the risk is, I would argue, the risk is greater by not showing them. All right, so if they were doing it earlier on in their life, like when they're in their 30s and 40s, they would have kept it and never have got to that stage, because their muscle and their strength gains would be so great. So the key is, you really got to learn to move perfectly well before you can move more, where most of the endurance training sort of removes the first half of this and says, stuff moving well, let's just do more of what I already have, which is probably pretty ordinary, but who cares, I'm doing more. It's all about calories or whatever it is. All right, so you just can never skip the technique stage. So you'll master the techniques of bending and lunging and pushing and pulling, and you'll have to do that at a low intensity, but you'll need to learn how to progress. So you can get a free report at the end. I'll give you that link to that, but and learn how to do all these movements, learn how to do them well. Once you've mastered them, then learn how to do it with loads, learn how to do it fast. You know, if you don't do that, you're not maximizing your ability to be the best you can be, and you're really setting yourself up for failure later on in life when you're going to lose that really, really quickly. Like I said, all the people who I've seen at all ages who have done power and speed training a lot and come from backgrounds of gymnastics and that are always the strongest and fittest and healthiest people I've ever met, always. Where the endurance focused ones always come with lots of problems. Okay, so does this mean you have to become a weightlifter or a gymnast? Absolutely not. All I'm trying to tell you here is that you really need to just have an understanding of like using exercises that will go to the high intensity realm, and you've got to be sure that your technique's satisfactory. So for example, if you're doing kettlebell swings, you're usually doing 100 or whatever it is, 50 or to 1 minute of them, or whatever it is you usually do in your circuit style. Every now and then come away from it and do 5 sets of 5 reps with a heavy load, because it's the same action. Both of them are deadlifting. This is just low intensity where the technique can be compromised. The technique cannot be compromised, but it's the same movement, it's the same exercise. So if you're confident with your technique there, you should have no trouble going there. But I guarantee you will probably have trouble going there because you won't understand how to breathe and the grip and all those things that will become a factor. You'll really suck at this one until you spend a lot of time with it. All right, but you'll gain so much more from this than you will ever from doing that. For example, and if you're in a class situation or something, if you're used to doing a WOD or whatever, you know, your circuit where back-to-back exercises of push-ups, body weight squats, burpees, walking lunges, ropes, all that sort of stuff. You know, and usually there's high volume of rep, there's little rest, if any rest. Come away from doing that for a while. Pick some of the exercises you know well. So if you're a good squatter, maybe pick a front squat. It's a very difficult exercise to master, but do 5 sets of 6 reps or 4 reps. You know, take a good long rest in between so you can maximize the load. You know, deadlifts, like we spoke about, chin-ups, a lot of people really struggle with them, bent over rows. You know, it could be anything. Usually the exercise will have to be simple if the intensity is high, so you wouldn't want to pick a complicated exercise in this intensity. All right, so but that's where I'm saying you don't have to be a gymnast or a weightlifter, but to understand how to progress your exercises. All right, so again, the process, if you're moving through the intensity scale, so all this sort of stuff is low intensity. This is where you're learning your skills to move well. Once you've sort of got that, you're moving into a higher intensity phase, and then really high intensity. So there's sort of stretching, stability exercises, strength exercise, and power. It's pretty simple. Most people just never get to this stage. You know, in the Pilates area, they're sort of stuck here all the time. The boot camps, they sort of have a little bit of this, but it ends up being more down this end. And you know, in CrossFit, sort of take these exercises and turn it into that, which is even more stupid. But you know, if you can sort of have a mixture of the two, then you can get away with things. But like I do a mixture of the two. But you know, if you're only doing endurance, you're going to be a potential candidate for injury down the track. So if you want more information, you can get the stack from our little black book here, and there's heaps of articles and videos on our website, so make sure you have a look, and I'll put some links in the description under this video that you can get your hands on. Alright, so hope you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you on our next one.